Hey guys, happy holidays. We're back and it is week 4 of DnDecember. Sorry this video upload was a little bit delayed. I was actually traveling for the holidays and currently house sitting for my parents. I actually have my PC tower hooked up to my family's living room TV set because I was an idiot and I didn't bring the right cables for my mom's monitor. So while my work situation is less than ideal, the show must go on. And we have a bunch of new designs this week, technically just 6 days, of festive Dungeons & Dragons designs. This is, of course, the second to last DnDecember video that we'll have this year, and if you haven't watched the other 3, be sure to check them out. The links are down in the description. But let's cut the chit-chat. We're going to begin our 4th week of DnDecember right now. Enjoy! Day 20 kicked us off with the species prompt Tabaxi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Tabaxi? I'm going to be pronouncing a lot of these wrong. Once again, this was a race of D&D that I was totally unfamiliar with, but as it turns out, you could just swap out Tabaxi with Khajiit, and I would know what they are. They're cat people, and instantly I had an idea to tie in another December holiday with my design. Now, I don't celebrate Kwanzaa, but I know it originates from African cultures, and I thought it would be a fun idea to do a lion man as the embodiment of the Kwanzaa season. Tefku Goldmane always considered himself to be very fortunate in life. He was the proud patriarch of a large family, and often fantasized about his many children rising in power to one day conquer kingdoms. He raised them to be ruthless, cold-hearted, and hungry for control. It was only when his children grew did he realize the mistakes that he had made. They grew distant, even paranoid of their father, and while some of them came to find the success that he had always hoped for them, they kept their lives private from him, out of fear of losing what they were always taught to be most important in life. Alone with an empty nest and no family to support him, he sought the counsel of a patron spirit to guide him to a place of happiness, and perhaps to mend his relationship with his children. He soon discovered the warmth of the flames, and became a disciple to their teaching. He learned the beauties of acceptance and the power of love, and opened his home and his fortunes to those in need. Word spread over the years of his kindness, which eventually reached his many children. And now, once a year, they convene with their father and his many new friends, together as one family. And slowly, his change of perspective has begun to reshape how they see the world. The next day we had Drow, or Drow, maybe? Drow, or however you pronounce it, are kind of just dark elves. If you haven't already noticed, I'm basing all of my knowledge of this fantasy world off of the Elder Scrolls. This meant that I'd be basically designing a human with pointy ears and glowy hair, so this design was more of an exercise in costume design for me. I rolled Fighter for class, which from what I can gather is pretty much a blanket term from a design standpoint. But with that vagueness, I thought of an idea for a weapon that looked like a wreath, and I kind of worked backwards from there. Originally I wanted to do like this big ring weapon, but I knew that my League fans would compare it to Kiana, so I tried something different. Arya Garland had a lot of trouble finding her place in the world. Growing up in a troubled home, the glittering lights and oversaturated colors of the holidays seemed to mock her. Her family never exchanged kind glances, let alone gifts, and while she watched the other children play in the snow, her jealousy for the magic they felt slowly festered into resentment. She renounced the joys of others and vowed to shatter their illusions of cheer and wonder so that they could see the world as she did, as it truly was. She sought out the Order of the Black Smog, but they refused her. For years she tried to prove her worth to the cult, but every time she was turned away. Alienated from both the joys of the holidays and the people who vowed to destroy them, she felt lost and hopeless. She wandered off into the snow and disappeared. Now, no one knows for sure what happened after that. Some say she lost her mind in that time she spent alone in the wilderness. Others say she was approached by a disciple of the flame. But whatever it was that happened to her out there in the cold, she came back a changed woman. Not as jolly and full of cheer as one might have hoped, but with a new perspective. She was still moody, resentful, and glum, but unlike before, she was able to draw strength from others' happiness, rather than feel ostracized by it. She pursued the company of others who shared similar experiences in life, and they reveled in both their misfortunes and their changes. People say that she wears that armor as a snarky jab at those who she feels takes the holidays too seriously, but it would seem that some part of her, deep down inside, feels that she can finally enjoy herself for the person she's always wanted to be. Okay, so it seems like the further down we go on this list, the more obscure these species prompts get. Furball. I've never heard of this one, but I guess they're a thing. They're kind of like satyrs, but without goat legs, I guess. They're very connected with nature and the animals and all that jazz. They're also actually really big, which was surprising to me. They're like 10 feet tall. Anyway, I finally rolled another bard for my class, and I got a good idea for who my festive furball could be. Yari, like many of her kind, lived in relative solitude for most of her life. She enjoyed the company of her family, her friends, and most of all her two closest companions, a bird named Chottle and a frog named Pock. The three had a reputation for disrupting the sanctity of the peaceful forests of the north. The furbolgs of the northern lands were not partiers, unlike many of the other inhabitants they shared their forest with. But Yari loved nothing more than the sound of a bell accompanied by the singing voices of all who were willing to join. She knew not of the ancient spirit of the north, nor the warmths of the flame. She had never participated in the annual traditions of the cultures around her, and yet, every year, when the days were shortest, she felt an urge like never before to play her music. An awful sound it was, the clanging of a rusty bell echoing through a dark forest, punctuated by the piercing shriek of a snowbird and the rumbling croak of a thick-skinned toad. But in those times of little sun and biting cold, the three's persisting enthusiasm lifted the spirits of her small clan, and while at first her songs were lonely and shrill, the voices of her family began to join in. In her own way, Yari was able to bring some joy to the season that can so easily drain happiness from our hearts. The joy that for some comes from the warmth of a fire or a glittering pile of gifts, but for others can come from within, and spread like a song on the wind to anyone who can hear it. Okay, so I'm happy to say that I actually know what a goblin is. For whatever reason, goblins are just one of those fantasy design tropes that have persisted beyond the realm of knowledge reserved by players of tabletop RPGs. And what's more, they're pretty much the same in every story they exist in. Small, grouchy, with big noses and sharp teeth. I've never been a fan of drawing creatures like goblins, it's just not my cup of tea. But this was a good challenge for me, especially since my class was Paladin, a designation not often assigned to goblins. Scribbern the Shield is one of the oldest members of the Black Smog. His revulsion of the ancient spirit and all things festive and joyful knows no bounds, and is contained by nothing other than his diminished and elderly physical stature. In his prime, he was on the front lines, fighting for his cause, but in his later years he finds himself frail and tired. Not willing to retire from his post, he's been assigned a comfortable position as a sentinel outside one of the Black Smog's hideouts. At first, all you'll see is a large shield sticking out of the snow. It's only when you step too close to the entryway that you'll be greeted by a sharp slap as a warning sign from the old goblin. If you're good with words, it's possible to escape the situation with little more than a fright and a tiny handprint on your cheek. Scribbern loves to talk about himself and his adventures in the cult, so with a few good questions you could have him rambling for hours. You might even be able to get the passcode into the hideout if you keep him talking long enough. So I knew from the beginning that I wanted Day 24's design to be the Singed King, which I've established in my other videos, and that Day 25 would be the Ancient Spirit of the North. I was just hoping that the species prompts for both would be something that I could use in a convincing way. I had a few different ideas for what the Singed King would look like, but when I found out what a Genasi, or Genasi, let's say Genasi, I'm sorry, I don't know how any of these things are pronounced, I knew which concept I was going to lock into. When I found out what a grung was, well, I mean, who doesn't love frog people? For this lore segment, I'll actually be giving the lore for both Day 24 and Day 25, because their lore is kind of closely connected. It was said that centuries ago, two friends, an Earth Genasi fighter and a grung sorcerer, moved away from the chaos and politics of the southern kingdoms to find their own way in the quiet solitude of the frigid northern lands. At this time, very few people inhabited that region, and there were no villages, huts, or any form of shelter for these two travelers. After some time, the two began to succumb to the cold, but just on the verge of death, they were approached by a wispy figure glowing like fire. The snow melted around her feet, and her warmth filled their bodies. She vowed to protect them from the cold, and in exchange, they must only keep her flame ignited. The two agreed, and set off collecting wood to help keep her spirit alight. But day after day her light waned, and no matter how much wood they fed her burning heart, it was not enough to keep her alive. The Genasi grew furious, and begged the spirit to tell them what was necessary to keep the fire lit. She said nothing and continued to fade. It was only when the grung removed his only coat to feed the fire that she once again began to burn. For it was not wood or coal that kept the warmth from dying, it was selflessness and a kind heart that she sought. From that day, the grung hoped to keep her fire lit by building a small refuge from the snow for other travelers to seek shelter in. He and the Genasi used their combined skills to construct an elaborate lodge that soon grew into a small village. People could come from far and wide with hopes of starting a new life, just as the two friends did. and they provided sanctuary for them with the warmth of the flame that now burned brighter than ever before. But while the Grung felt satisfaction from his deeds, the Genasi was enamored by the power that this flame had brought him. He abused his control over the village and threatened to take the flame away from those who crossed him. It was this conflict between the two friends that caused the flame to burn black, spewing smoke and ash and burning everything that she touched. The Grung tried to warn his friend, but he had been blinded by the power which he had convinced himself was his. One night he attempted to consume the flame, to absorb her power into his own body. The result was a disastrous fire that burned the village to the ground. The Grung tried to save as many as he could, but he could not save his friend. He had been lost to the flames, and in turn, the flame herself was lost. Or so it would seem. For while the flame may have died, some part of her lived on in the Grung, and he was able to rebuild his village with all the warmth and kindness that she had taught him. Centuries passed, and the Grung's kindness transcended rumors and became legend. His village was the first of many that began to sprout up all along the northern lands, and once a year, people of the north give thanks to him and his sacrifices with celebrations of love and acts of selflessness. It is said that he continues to live on in some way, and children believe that the gifts they receive for the holidays are given to them by his hand. But, as his spirit persists, so does the spirit of his friend, the Genasi. The charred ruins of the first village have become a temple and place of worship to him and his unyielding quest for power. His most devout followers believe that his consumption by the flame has granted him immortality and strength beyond measure. Whether or not these two continue to live on in some way may never be known for sure, but their struggle of ideals persists in the hearts of all. The natives of this region know, without a doubt, whether they believe in the legends or not, nowhere is the strength of one's selflessness tested more than in the frigid barrens of the northern lands. Okay guys, that is the end of this week's prompts. I only did 6 because I wanted to split it evenly for the last 2 weeks, because next week we'll only have 6 prompts as well. Anyway, let me know what you guys think and tell me which one was your favorite from this week. Also, I want to showcase a few of my favorite pieces that you guys have done for this week of DnDecember. Keep up the good work everyone, happy DnDecember, and I'll see you all in the next video.